All right, folks, welcome to Heavy Hands. I am your host, Connor Rebush. With me, as always, is my dear friend, Phil Mackenzie. Phil? How are you?
Wow, I mean, better than you from the sounds of things.
Yes, I'm very ill. Terribly.
Is it just me, or have we kind of feel like we've made it? We made it out of the desert. The desert was actually really short, and the desert was full of insane violence.
Yeah, desert was.
Now there's suddenly too much. There's suddenly too much to talk about again.
The desert was full of like psychotropic mushrooms. The desert was a fucking party. This was like Burning Man.
Yep.
Yeah. I got a tattoo.
I mean, not all of the violence was like the highest level violence, but honestly, who cares? Like,
and some of it was.
We got 2 straight cards which just massively overperformed. They were best case scenarios.
Well, isn't it always the case, Phil? Isn't it always these cards? The cards you don't care about are never bad.
That is untrue.
That's no.
Sometimes they really are.
No,
but these ones weren't.
Yeah. They last week's card was possibly the card of the year so far. It was awesome.
Mm-hmm.
Like, even the bad fights were only bad by comparison. It was a really sensational, like, is it like Zalal, Blackshear, and Nunes, Calvillo were the bad fights, and they weren't bad.
No.
And then, yeah, most of everything else was horrible bangers and a couple of disgusting finishes, which was what mostly defined the card the week before. Yeah, pretty good desert, gotta say. However, I must dispute that we're entirely out of it, because there's a good bit of desert preceding the 3 interesting fights that we're going to be trying to talk about today, coming up on this next pay-per-view card, which is UFC 275. I knew that already. I didn't have to look.
278, isn't it?
Yeah, that's what I said. They don't look similar, those 2 numbers. I said the right one. Yeah, so, don't get your hopes up too much yet, because there's a possibility, which we'll get into, of a quite deserted version of this main event, that being Kamaru Usman versus Leon Edwards 2 at last. But there's also a lot of trash on the prelims. So, we'll see.
Yeah, it really, the card utterly disintegrates after the top 3, really.
Yeah. You lose one of those top 2 fights, you're looking at a card that feels pretty bad. Could still surprise us. Could still be scintillating. There's something in the air lately, but, yeah. So anyway, Usman Edwards 2, that's our main event. We have, of course, Jose Aldo versus Narabh, Dewalish, Willie down there in the main card, and then the co-main event slot, a fight that is interesting and will almost certainly be some version of fun to watch, but probably won't take a long time breaking down. The co-main event is Paulo Costa, Bo Hashinya, the king of the bitches himself, versus, I guess a rival king of the bitches, really, in Luke Rockhold.
Yeah, I mean, that's one of the... We'll get into it later, but it's one of the amusing dynamics about it.
Yeah. So, Chad versus Chad. There's a lot there that doesn't really involve the really pressing question of the fight. So Usman Edwards. I mentioned it could be a desert. I think this is, both more interesting and less interesting than it would have been at really any point prior to like Usman Covington 2. Because on the one hand, Leon Edwards long ago wore off all of the goodwill that he earned, honestly, largely in that fight with Kamaru Usman. That was, one of the most notable, like, fighter impressing me in a loss performances in the last 5 years or so. Where yeah, I was really quite blown away. I was like, man, this guy dealt with the wrestling so well. And really like took it to Kamaru Usman and he just had an answer for everything. Even if he lost, I can't wait to see these guys match up again someday. It was like a Tsarukian, Makhachev kind of thing. And, you know, now I've seen a lot of Leon Edwards since then. So that impression's kind of gone away. The other thing is, though, that, like, I spent the last 2 or 3 years just being like, oh yeah, Edwards is going to lose. He doesn't actually have it. He loses focus in his fights. He keeps just like getting hurt, and he just doesn't press his advantage. Like, he doesn't know how to win a fight. He just knows how to, like, hold on to rounds, and that's not going to be enough. And now I've seen Usman Covington too, and put it in the context of Usman's preceding fights, and now I am not really quite so sure that Kamaru Usman is going to be the same guy, or that the version he is now is going to give the same challenges to Leon Edwards. So I think we could be looking at a very interesting fight. I think it's also possible this is the most boring version of this matchup we have that is possible, where we have an increasingly cautious, capital T technical Kamaru Usman versus the perennially capital T technical Leon Edwards. And that if neither guy is going to press the other, there is a chance here that we get a pretty tepid contest. You have higher hopes than that, I believe.
Yeah, I mean, I'm still concerned that this is going to be one of those fights between two guys, you know, at the top of their division, who are both, like, convinced that they are, you know, the best in their division, but where we're going to get something which is kind of messy. Like, I think that there seems to be a lot of reason to assume that, like, we might get something a bit like Rockhold Weidman, from my perspective. So I think it's gonna be less boring and more just like
gross.
It's gonna be like moments of them both looking good, followed by like just moments of inexplicable, one of them inexplicably getting rocked, or just long periods of like getting held up against the fence. But I mean that's really getting to it for me, though, because like the journey of Leon Edwards has been, he basically came to the UFC largely as a kind of one-handed power puncher. You know, he knocked out poor old Seth Brzezinski, was it?
Yep.
In like 5 seconds, and they still have to use that on highlight reels.
Yep.
Then he became
that was his last one.
Then he just became a like quite diligent wrestler, and he's kind of synthesized the spaces in between all that. You know, he's a really good clinch fighter.
Yeah.
He has learned to throw in combination more, I think. And you know, when he wants to be, can be like a really pretty offensive fighter.
Yeah, I question that more combinations thing, having just watched Usman Edwards 1. I mean, that's way more combinations than I've seen from Leon Edwards in some time, but
yeah. You know, that's the main thing that kind of changes that fight is just that Usman can run him into the fence whenever he wants to.
Sure.
And that was kind of what I found myself thinking whenever they talked about this fight being matched up again. I was like, it doesn't really matter because Usman can just run him into the fence. Like, he's improved as a wrestler, but the issues weren't so much that he just got tons of takedowns in that fight. I mean, it happened later, but it was the fact that Usman kept getting dominant clinch positions and just dominant positions on the cage until Leon Edwards got tired out because he wasn't as physically big and strong as him.
Right.
He just didn't have as much, you know, he'll never have as much wrestling acumen or experience as Kamaru Usman.
No.
It just put him at a fundamental disadvantage. And
I mean, I think that fight is kind of pivotal in Edwards' career. I think that was his Gustafsson Davis moment where, like, we've seen a lot more proactive wrestling out of Edwards since. I think that was the thing that sort of changed the course of his career, was being out wrestled by Usman. But you're absolutely right that he really was up to the task of stopping the takedowns. It was the size and strength and persistence of Usman, which are qualities he still has. But does he still have the wrestling, the actual wrestling?
Yes.
That is the question.
Yeah. And, you know, if you look at fights like the RDA fight for Edwards, right? This is not a fight where he just had some kind of Jose Aldo kind of performance where he just never let RDA get a hold of him and just pivoted off and beat him up the whole time. No, it was largely due to the fact that he was able to engage in the clinch with him and beat him there.
Yeah.
He got pushed into the fence tons of times, but he just beat RDA in the clinch when that happened. So the real question is Usman gonna force Leon Edwards into the cage? Because based on his recent performances, the answer is no.
Mm-hmm.
Like, does he know to just go back to that? And if he doesn't know that, is he going to get into enough trouble that he then realizes that he has to go back to it? Because there's been a lot said about whether, by us more than anything else, whether, Usman's knees are basically preventing him from being much of a wrestler. But he doesn't necessarily need his knees that much.
No, he didn't.
To enforce that game plan. Right.
In the first fight, very few of those, even ones that ended up in like stalled shots, very few of them started as shot takedowns. There were some clean ones as the fight went on. It was more just running into the clinch and just grabbing an underhook and just, mashing Leon Edwards. He could still do that. But the other, the shots I think are much harder, the question is it past the point of no return for Usman in his development? That fight was. He,
at some point, you run the risk of becoming John Jones, where you can no longer offensively wrestle.
Exactly. You've had to adapt around this hindrance or whatever, and now it's just not. It doesn't even come to mind anymore. I don't know. So we have to talk about Trevor Whitman a bit. Trevor Whitman got no end of well-deserved praise for having just an outstanding stable of fighters. Kamaru Usman, Justin Gaethje, Rose Namajunas, and other less notable but similarly skilled fighters besides. He's obviously an incredible coach. And I will always love Trevor Whitman for actually stopping fights in the corner too. He has my eternal respect and admiration for that. We had, I think, yet another example of MMA coaches not doing that last weekend, which unfortunately you will almost certainly have to hear as a bonus episode on our Patreon. But we have already discussed in the past the question of does Trevor Whitman have ultimately a sort of anti-MMA effect on his fighters? Where does he prune away too much of the sort of aggression that still most of the time seems more or less necessary to win high-level MMA fights? Does he get his fighters to think... Does he kind of, turn them a little Leon Edwards-ish over time, where they're just like, no, I'm winning if I'm not letting the other guy do anything, and then they forget to do something. And I kind of dismissed that last time, but we've had more evidence since the last time we discussed this. We had Namajunas Esparza too. So obviously the height of that concern is Rose Namajunas is ruined. That is you're never going to be the same after this terrible performance. And then Usman had that second fight with Covington, which was about 50% all the things Usman has gained under Whitman, and then 50% sort of suggesting things that he might have lost. Pretty worryingly. So I don't know. Do we have a stance on this? Do we think that Usman has just irrevocably lost some of that aggression? Because the other part is not just grabbing clinches. It wasn't the wrestling at all. The other part of his success against Leon Edwards was just constant aggression. He was very aggressive in that first fight. And, so what do you think? Do you think, is Trevor Whitman, killing the fighting spirit of his fighters?
Usman is not a young fighter at this point, and he has been fighting a relentlessly physical style for a very long time.
Yep.
I think at some point you have to make this kind of change. You physically can't hold up an aggressive wrestling style for that long. One of the reasons why, with with some weird exceptions, like, I don't know, like Clay Guida, fighters Clay Guida dropped down several levels of competition over the course of his career.
Yeah.
Like, the fighters we think of as being, like, having long, successful careers at the top don't generally fight as super aggressive wrestlers, because your body just can't hold up to it. But yeah, all that being said, yes, I do think that is what has happened to Kamaru Usman, and I think it's going to continue in the Edwards fight. And I think that potentially spells a lot of problems for him, because he's going to be fighting someone who is, I think, much more comfortable with the southpaw double threat than Colby Covington is. Someone who has a better integrated striking and clinch game. Covington is either spamming takedowns or he is just flailing madly on the feet.
Right.
Or he's, trying to be technical himself.
Yeah.
But Edwards, he has a very slick and integrated game between his strikes and his clinch. And there's real questions that, like, Usman just trying to run his game of, like, throwing the jab and then retreating and then throwing the 1-2 and then retreating, so on, that Edwards can chase him, and Edwards can land clean shots and then can convert those shots into more offense.
Mm-hmm.
But on the other hand, there's, the benefits of Trevor Whitman's training is that Kamaru Usman is just a much bigger hitter than he used to be.
Sure.
And as we've said about Leon Edwards, he takes his thighs off the road at least one point in every long fight.
Yep.
So you've got to ask yourself, like, is he getting decked at some point in this fight? And the answer is probably yes.
Probably. Yeah, even if things are going swimmingly or if nothing is happening, he's probably still getting decked. Yeah, but my concern is still about nothing happening. I mean, you don't see how that's a distinct possibility that a less aggressive, cause here's the problem. Edwards looked really good in their first fight. I think it still stands out as one of his most impressive performances, even though he lost. Lots of combinations, great counterpunching, couple of nice, sort of transitions in and out of the clinch, stuff that we now associate more with Leon Edwards, and really tenacious wrestling defense that, really only fell apart because of just sheer exhaustion and it not being a kind of fight he was at all used to. I have to assume, even with Usman's strength, that were we to get a wrestling heavy fight like that, Edwards would hold up better now, because he just wrestles all the damn time. He's got to have the stamina for it built in, the way Usman always has. But how much of that fight being, like, competitive and Edwards looking good, again, is just Usman's aggression. It's the best thing for Usman. It was also, I think, the best thing for Edwards. How does Leon Edwards seize an advantage against a guy who, let's face it, is quite good at standing at range and jabbing people? And he is going to jab. I know it's a southpaw here. I have no doubt Kamaru Usman's going to use his jab plenty. He used it plenty against Colby.
Uh-huh.
So his game is going to be unchanged, and his game is quite stable and consistent and effective from that long range, and doesn't make it altogether easy to just land single shot counters. So is Leon even gonna, like, is he gonna find moments? Is he gonna, what's the pace gonna look like if Kamaru doesn't press him? I think it has a deleterious effect on both of them. It's not the best way to win, and it's also not the best way for Edwards to compete, because if that's the kind of fight we get, we're looking at a lot of very close and indecisive rounds. Or maybe just Usman, hitting hard enough to hurt Edwards is entirely what decides the fight.
I mean, that's the thing, though. I mean, Edwards just isn't someone that has close rounds. I mean, I was saying this before the fight. With the weird and egregious exception of that Gunnar Nelson fight, like, he's never one of these guys where you're like, you know, he's not a Ben Henderson or a Robbie Lawler where you're just like, oh, I don't know whether he won that. When he wins rounds, he genuinely does like win them quite clearly.
Well, yeah, that's great to say as an abstract, but how does he do it? He does it when he has a distinct advantage over someone in some phase. Like, this is the power of Edwards' well-roundedness too, that like, he's not going to however degraded Usman's wrestling is, he's not going to out-wrestle Usman. He can't bank rounds.
What I'm saying is that he tends to, like, neither of these guys are, I mean, Edwards is to more of an extent, but neither of these guys are completely passive, like, not do anything fighters.
No.
I think Edwards merely does what he thinks he needs to win.
Okay.
So the minute he is behind in this fight, he will try and push forward to win back what he's lost.
That's a good point. Yeah. The issue is not Edwards being out of the fight and not doing enough. It's doing just enough to be winning.
If Usman hits a low metronomic pace, if he starts winning that, I think Edwards will start pushing a slightly higher pace.
Yeah.
And then Usman will have to like respond in turn. Because I think he has a real instinct for how much he has to do to win rounds. And that's in some ways what gets him into trouble. But he doesn't take his foot off the gas like a Masvidal does. He doesn't he doesn't lose track of where the round is going.
Yeah. He rides when Leon Edwards is on a road and it's, I don't know, what's your normal speed limit over there? 40 kilometers an hour?
70 miles an hour.
Oh, you still do miles over there. That's right.
Mm-hmm.
Well, so let's say he's on an American street, 35 miles an hour, suburban street. You know, my dude is riding at 34.
Yep.
He is throttling perfectly. Yeah, I think that's true. It's easy to think that because he's just not doing enough to impress in these fights, that it's never the case that he's not doing enough to win.
Yeah, I mean, the RDA fight is, I think, his best example of this, where he's
right.
just like, RDA keeps trying to push him out of the fight, and Edwards just raises the intensity just enough.
Yeah.
So that he can, so that he's just winning pretty clearly and consistently.
Yeah. And often just enough so that he can sort of relax again, which is when he gets into trouble.
Mm-hmm. So the other interesting X factor is how much Kamaru Usman is getting hurt.
Mm-hmm.
He's never been unhittable, but again, it's just a physical thing, and he just walked through punches before.
Right.
Which, I mean, like, who was it? It was Sergio Moraes.
Yeah.
I think was one of those ones where just like
he just hunted him
Moraes.
down.
Yeah, and he just chased him down, and Moraes just bombed him in the face as hard as he could, and Usman just ignored him and just and kept punching until he fell over.
And what a fall over it was.
Yeah. And there's always been like a little element of that to Usman's game, but I think we're definitely seeing that just like years of taking punches clean to the face are starting to catch up with him a bit.
Mm-hmm.
He got hurt pretty badly by Colby Covington both times they fought. He got dropped by Gilbert Burns. Masvidal didn't really do anything.
No.
But then neither of those fights were particularly
competitive.
Neither of those fights were particularly like eventful in their own way.
Mm-hmm.
But again, he's at least partially insulated by the fact that Edwards doesn't knock anyone out.
Yeah. He still seems like he could. You know, when Edwards is having to throw, he's still very fast and accurate. He's a really sharp puncher. But
he staggers people a lot.
Yeah. The elbows hurt people. No doubt about that. Mm-hmm. Those are the shots he tends to hurt people with the most. But yeah, he does have a sort of, with his punches, there is a sort of like Edson Barboza at 155 kind of vibe, where it's like, man, this guy's lightning quick, and look at these shots are so cracking, and people just eat them.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, like a washed Cerrone, a semi-washed, I guess, by modern standards. Like,
right, yeah.
You know, lasted 5 rounds with him. Like, he couldn't get Diaz out of there. I mean, admittedly, hard to do, but probably less so now than it used to be. Yeah, he's just one of the ones where I feel like Usman's defensive flaws and probably waning durability are probably not going to hurt him that much this time.
Right.
Because again, I think both of these guys might get rocked at some point in this fight.
Yeah.
Leon Edwards because he's Leon Edwards, and Kamaru Usman because he's starting to lose a step. But I don't think that Edwards can follow up and finish because he just never does it.
Yeah. Yeah, and also I think he will still, even if he hurts Usman, I still think Usman has an incredible poker face. Like, unless he actually gets dropped, he's not going to invite the already uncharacteristic attempt to finish out of Leon Edwards that much. He's going to look quite stable and have his eyes open and be ready to meet Leon with a jab as soon as he tries to charge in.
Yeah.
Yeah, I don't know. It's the decline of Kamaru Usman, I think, that makes this really hard to call, more than anything else. Because if I wasn't worried about his chin at all, if I wasn't worried about his ability or willingness to wrestle, and if I wasn't worried about whether or not he's actually going to pressure and, like, make Leon uncomfortable. But even then, I just don't know, like, It's easy to overlook the fact that, like, in that kind of slow-paced boxing match, Kamaru Usman really is quite good. Yes. Now that he it's not all been losses. This tutelage under Trevor Whitman, and that in a cruel twist of fate, after having a fight where Leon Edwards got to show off for the first time that he actually has some real promise as a wrestler. We may now get a rematch in which Kamaru Usman just does the thing Leon Edwards thought he was good at and just kind of wins.
Mm-hmm.
That, he's got a jab, Phil. Like, this is consistent.
He's got a jab that we know he is willing to throw against southpaws.
Absolutely. And he will take available targets. He works the body. He'll kick from long range as well. I think I don't know. I just hope that leads to a fight where Edwards can feel that Usman is doing really well at range and has to actually create some opportunities. I just hope this. I do think Edwards is the kind of fighter where he's always fighting to the level of his competition, and frequently that disappoints you. But it also has the potential to be a very exciting fight where Edwards has to do it to win. He's clearly a man who loves winning. And I just hope that we get to see him start to lose, basically, because then I think we're going to see the best Leon Edwards.
Yeah, I mean, kind of the best case scenario is that we just get kind of a continuation of their first fight, but now they're both better in their own respective areas.
Right.
It's just that kind of go everywhere, physical, just end of a war.
Yeah.
Unfortunately, I think we get something kind of between the two extremes.
Probably.
I don't think I don't think it's going to be boring, but also I don't think it's going to be like their first fight.
Yeah.
And yeah, I mean, I think I just have to pick Kamaru Usman.
Right.
I mean, just because I think, I mean, if Edwards was a bit more physically potent, I would trust him to be able to survive like long periods of Usman pressure and then hurt him.
Right.
Frankly, but other than that, I don't see why Usman isn't going to realize that he can just still push Edwards back into the fence. If he starts losing rounds, I think he just goes back to I think he just goes back to their first fight.
I mean, the first Masvidal fight wasn't that long ago.
No.
That's all he did in that one.
Yep.
There's still no real reason to believe that cautious boxing Usman is here forever. And again, he didn't have to hit like lightning shots on Edwards to out-wrestle him the first time. That's not how it started.
Yeah. I mean, yeah, I'll be interested to see how many things play out. Edwards clinch attacks. Like, can Edwards low kick him? He's quite good at low kicking in the open stance matchup, but it's as we've seen many times, it's not tremendously difficult to deal with like open stance low kicks.
Yeah.
It'll be interesting if he does that to neutralize Usman's jab. Yeah, I mean, I got to pick Usman just because, and apart from anything else, it's our kind of law of rematches.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and it feels
like it was a fight where these two were built to compete, but where one of them was always going to have a slight edge.
Right, and where the one guy has gotten better in the other guy's area of strength and vice versa, it feels like Edwards, I don't know that he would ever be good enough at wrestling to actually proactively out-wrestle Usman. That still feels like a wash to me. Whereas it's possible for inferior strikers to have good moments against Leon on the feet. Mm-hmm. And Usman, I don't think, is really any more an inferior striker. And in fact, I think there's some argument that this version of Kamaru is more comfortable in extended exchanges than Edwards ever has been. Because Edwards, we've talked about this before, but half the problem is temperament, but half of it is technical, that he can't do that many things in a row without his form sort of collapsing. That he still like frequently overthrows on left hands, and you'll see two really good punches at the start of a combination, and the third one, there's like no recovering from it, and he has to reset. And Usman, I think, is actually ironed a lot of those things out and gained some defense, and remains pretty just confident and composed in wild exchanges, even if he is getting hurt more. He's pretty aware in the pocket. Just sometimes a little slow to react. Yeah, you got to pick Usman.
Yep. Yeah, I mean, I think with Usman, it's more just that he's trained himself into being okay when he gets hit.
Yeah.
Because I think he's just always going to be a bit of a wooden striker.
Yeah.
Now he's just like, well, I'm going to throw this. There's a solid chance I'm going to get countered. And I'm just going to eat it.
Mm-hmm.
Sometimes it hasn't worked that well. Like, there were some pretty bad things some bad exchanges against Burns, and against Covington. But, he sticks to the railroad tracks.
He irons these problems out. I think he's a better problem solver than Edwards. You will see like particular areas where he does the fifth round of the first fight with Covington, like, even after the initial like wild flurries in Covington 2, you still see like, oh, he's like trying to do things defensively. He's moving his head. He's trying to respond to this. He doesn't just keep getting overwhelmed in the exact same way over and over again. Neither does Edwards, but it enhances Usman's ability to just stick to a winning game plan and be more proactive. Okay. Hope it's good. Might not be. Hope it's good. It could be. Very well could be good.
That's a ringing endorsement if ever I heard one.
Yeah. It might not be good. Could be. Could be bad. It just took too long to happen. Why do we have to see 18 fights between variations of Masvidal, Usman, and Covington? Why didn't this fight happen 4 years ago? Or whatever the hell.
Imagine if Usman looks totally shot and just loses.
Exactly.
It's going to be so dispiriting.
I think too many things have changed in too many indefinable ways.
Yeah.
And then we have to have Edwards as champion. Can you imagine this guy with a defensive championship mindset? It'll be a nightmare, Phil.
Well, he'll have to fight Khamzat Chimaev in his first defense, so I don't think that will be an issue.
Thank God. A fight where even if Edwards wins, it'll be like an incredibly ballsy, exciting performance. Okay, good. Mm-hmm. Okay, we're safe. No matter what happens, we're safe. On that note, let's take a break. When we come back, Bohashinia versus Luke Rockhold, the Battle of the Coxmen. And then Jose Aldo versus Narabh, Dewalish, Willie. And after that, Dominic Cruz, Chito Vera. Coming up.
Hey everybody, thanks for listening to this week's Heavy Hands. If you like what you hear, please consider pledging to support the podcast on Patreon. Patreon is basically continuous crowdfunding. You sign up to contribute a certain amount per month to help us with production costs and the like, and in return you get rewards ranging from a mention on the Heavy Hands website to a question or topic of your choice being discussed on the show. We have a lot more in the works to reward you for your help, and we appreciate every contribution. No amount is too small. Just head over to patreon.com and find how you can help out, the only show dedicated to the finer points of face punching. Now let's get back to it.
Welcome back to Heavy Hands. The fights, Phil. There's more of them.
Hurrah.
The first one. It's receding hairline hour. It's penile insecurity hour. It's I don't know, drinking wine? Luke Rockhold probably likes wine. It's the broiest fight there's ever been.
Yeah. I mean, at one point in history, this would have been, as many Paulo Costa fights are, a shoo-in for the Patrick Weidman Memorial Award.
Yeah.
I mean, Rockhold does at least tend to come into his fights looking muscular, but then there's that feeling nowadays that you know that sort of Frank Mir feeling that you're looking at muscles which aren't quite real.
Yeah, Luke Rockhold's 80% synthol at this point, is what you're saying. It's just, what if Luke Rockhold
He's just gonna burst? It's gonna go spraying all over the canvas.
What if he came in? Somebody's gonna burst in this fight. I'll tell you that. There's gonna be some. What if he came in looking as buff as Paulo Costa? Like he had clearly had cosmetic surgery to look more muscular. That would be awesome.
I would rate it. Great deal.
I would ship it.
He just had plastic surgery to make himself just look facially more like Paulo Costa. It might be one of those things which would actually just break Costa mentally.
Yeah, we would find out how much Paulo Costa really loves himself. Or if it is.
Yeah, he'd just be hypnotized. Just watching Luke Rockhold simply just like starts striking poses instead of fighting and slowly walks up to Paulo Costa. He's just hypnotized at how beautiful he is. And then Rockhold just question mark kicks him in the head.
So, you know, it's the sad thing is that at an earlier time, this would have been a genuinely very fascinating fight, I think, in addition to it being very funny and just having obviously a hilarious dynamic between these two, just like insufferable coxmen who like are so overconfident that it is just despicable. But the pressing question about this matchup now really, I think, is rather obvious. How long does Luke Rockhold have to live? Is basically the question.
He hasn't fought very much.
No.
Lately. He's been famously injury prone since the start of his career. He came up in Prime AKA.
Yeah.
Where everyone just tore each other to pieces.
Yeah.
He had to pull out against, I think, Strickland, with a herniated disc.
Ooh.
He said that when he fought Blachowicz, he said that he couldn't make middleweight anymore. None of this sounds like it's a good time for Luke Rockhold.
No.
And like Paulo Costa seems to be more stable than he has been in the past. Like, you know,
I'm sorry. The canceled rematch with Chris Weidman from 2018. It just says you expanded on Tapology, and it says canceled. Rockhold sustained multiple training injuries.
Yeah.
So I'm so sorry. I just read that as you were talking. Please go on.
Yeah, I mean, he's pulled out of a shit ton of fights.
Yeah.
But, Costa was kind of going insane in his last fight.
Yeah.
Against Vettori. You know, he missed weight. He'd been sexually humiliated by Israel Adesanya.
Right.
And his hair was starting to fall out.
Yeah.
But now, like, he's looking in great physical shape. He's found a really good hair plug.
Yeah.
Like, he seems utterly rejuvenated. So it just seems like one of those ones where he's just gonna put him out. He's gonna put Rockhold out to pasture like he did Johnny Hendricks.
Paulo Costa should just be bald. He'll look like Billy Zane. He's still going to be incredibly
Billy Zane's Hulk alter ego.
What? He'd still be. What I'm saying is, he'd still be an incredibly good-looking man without hair.
Yeah,
he would rock bald very easily.
Oh yeah, absolutely. I
don't know. It's crazy the way insecurities work. That a man like Paulo Costa could possibly be insecure about his hair.
Well, I mean, yeah, the hairlines are a big part of this fight.
Yeah, very much so. Yeah. I feel like it would be cool if both of them did a compensation haircut instead of plugs, if they both had like the George Roop hair. Classic male pattern baldness compensation hairstyle. The sort of...
Yep, just comb it over the top.
The pseudo faux hawk is a good way to go.
I mean, Luke Rockhold has kind of made concessions to that kind of style before, but yeah, he could really go the whole hog. I think that would also be a good way to try and intimidate Costa, because he doesn't have much else of a chance here.
Yeah, that's really all there is to the fight, honestly, to break down. Is I think it's even possible that Luke Rockhold could come in and look kind of good. I mean, he's had those moments before. That fight with Yoel Romero was not just Luke Rockhold getting knocked out the whole time. He made some...
I thought he looked genuinely quite decent in that
honestly,
fight.
He made some real strides in his boxing. I think a lot of that seemed to have deteriorated by the time he fought Jan Blachowicz, but some of that was almost certainly the fact that it's Jan, and he's genuinely very difficult to fight from range. But yeah, it's just that Paulo Costa, even with the absolute insanity and being like, oh, this man is permanently, irrevocably broken from the aforementioned sexual humiliation at the hands, and not just the hands, of Israel Adesanya. But despite all of the madness that took place in like the 2-day span leading up to, and even just the final 24 hours before that fight with Vettori, he looked fine in the fight. He looked as impressive as ever, honestly, and it was a best ever showing from Vettori. But Paulo Costa just like, oh, this guy's he's sucking wind 4 minutes in. He's going to gas. No, just same as ever. Guy expends a huge amount of energy, throws everything with maximum power, and just keeps going. He's almost certainly on some incredibly nice steroids. And they're doing great for him.
And I think he is just a gritty competitor when it comes down
Absolutely.
to it as well.
The vast majority of the time. He's lose.
He's one of those guys where I think he can mess up, but once he's outside the cage, but once he's in there, with the exception of the Adesanya fight, he's genuinely just like, okay, it's go time.
Yeah. Now that would be an interesting thing. If Paulo Costa does not go out insanely aggressive, as he obviously should, just run at Luke Rockhold and hit him in the face, you could have a strange sort of version of that Adesanya fight.
Mm-hmm.
Where Rockhold is a very dangerous kicker.
Yeah, exactly. If he just strands himself at range, Rockhold is presumably, assuming that, parts of his body that stop him from being able to do that haven't fallen off. And it is really notable that fighters, we've talked about, how wrestling ages fighters, but also people stop kicking when they get older.
Yeah.
Fairly obvious reasons. Like the flexibility goes and, the risk of damaging yourself gets higher. Like, people just don't kick as much when they get older. But yeah, if he just strands himself at range, sure. A somewhat intact Luke Rockhold can just start kicking his leg out.
Yeah, but why
as
would
he was doing quite a lot to Yoel Romero.
Sure, yeah. But why would he do that? I mean, like, there's no mystique around Luke Rockhold at this point. There's no, I have to be better than ever to beat him. Like, you're Paulo Costa. You've got to be feeling confident. Just run out and hit the dude on the chin.
Mm-hmm.
And hit his body. He's a tall guy. You're going to have the targets, just hit him everywhere. Be super aggressive. You can probably finish him in the first round if you want to.
Yeah, almost certainly.
Yeah. So that's the fight. Paulo Costa is the pick. And, I just hope that it's funny.
Yeah. Whatever happens. You want some kind of cartoonish lunacy to happen in there.
I just hope that it's funny. Okay, so let's talk about the really quite interesting fight on this undercard. Possibly the most interesting of these top three, and I'm the most potentially depressing for me personally. Narabh Dewalish Willie versus Jose Aldo himself. What do you think?
It's a fight that Jose Aldo should win from a technical standpoint.
Mm-hmm.
And yet. I think is the main, like, question here. Because Narabh Dvalishvili is someone that you don't want to get old against.
No, exactly.
He's
youth
a
incarnate.
relentless. I mean, but in the same way that, like, in a slightly different way, he is like Chito Vera. He is just simply tireless and immortal, and you're not going to get him out of there, and he's going to keep coming the entire time, and there's going to be nowhere to hide. That being said, like I said, Aldo should be able to win this. I think we actually praised Dvalishvili a lot for his performance with John Dodson.
Sure.
Which was, a fight against someone, again, with rock-solid takedown defense, a big, counter-puncher, a big kind of explosive fighter who could steal big moments against Dvalishvili. And he did a really good job of sort of doing a, ersatz Volkanovski approach.
Yeah.
Just slowly working his way in behind a ton of bullshit. And then, gradually building up a points lead, whilst Dodson was waiting for a big opening.
It was I don't know if we made that comparison at the time, but very accurate. Very much a Volkanovski kind of fight.
Just like burning time in the clinch. And just low damage point scoring shots the whole time.
A lot of feints, a lot of volume without risk.
Mm-hmm. So, I mean, I think the question is, can he do that against Jose Aldo? And is that the right approach against Jose Aldo? Because there's an alternative approach he could try, which is to bum rush Jose Aldo and try to get him out of there and just try and wear his gas tank out.
Yeah. Or just, and I really hate to say this, out wrestle him?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, oh yeah, that's actually a good point, Bantamweight Jose Aldo just doesn't have the defensive wrestling reactions he used to.
Yeah, it's a thing that's just more possible than ever. And even Jose Aldo at his very best, when he did get taken down and had to accept a position, it's not like the guy's amazing off of his back.
No.
Even like that last round of his fight with Ricardo Lamas, which he just thoroughly dominated. He spent like 3.5 minutes with Lamas just throwing punches, just holding on to guard.
But this was something Aldo did at least twice, where he was just like, you know what, I'm just going to chill out here. I'm pretty sure I've won. No, he did it against what's his face, Canadian
Hominick.
Hominick, yeah. Pretty much the same thing. Mm-hmm. Just gave up takedowns in the last round. He was just like, I don't care. I'm just going to ride this out.
He did a Derek Lewis.
Yeah. Yes, at bantamweight, this isn't like that. He's been giving up early takedowns. He got lateral dropped by Marlon Moraes.
Right. Yeah, I'm not saying that's what's been happening. I'm just saying we know that's a possibility. Yeah. That if he gets exhausted, that that kind of fight is in him, and Narabh Dvalishvili can just, it's not like we saw the Dodson fight, we saw that, love that word ersatz, by the way. Have no idea if you used it correctly. Because I don't know what it means, but that I'm going to use it anyway. Ersatz Volkanovski approach. But that's clearly not what he's defined by now. Cause at the very least when he needed to against Marlon Moraes, it was just classic Dewalish, just brutal, relentless wrestling and smashing ground and pound from top position.
And also almost getting horribly killed.
Yeah, almost getting nuked. And that may very well happen as well. Jose Aldo's still dynamite counterpuncher, bantamweight seems to hit harder than ever. But you get in on one early takedown, who knows what kind of landslide that starts. And if you can't get in on one early takedown, but you just hold Jose Aldo against the fence, this is also a thing that Aldo has allowed to happen before. To gain time to rest and everything. And I just don't know that that's viable against a guy like Narabh. He's absolutely tireless, and the chances of getting him out of there or winning the fight with one single moment are very small. Cause it's not like he can't be hit. It's not like he didn't almost get finished by Marlon, but he didn't. He didn't get finished. He is teak tough. This is a youth versus age matchup, and Narabh is capable of fighting the style that is basically youth incarnate. Just deal with my physical presence nonstop the entire fight. And how do you like that? So I don't know. I'm quite concerned, honestly, that it seems so possible that, Jose could have, this could easily be like his Pedro Munoz fight, where he just has a guy who's not all that sharp, a striker, albeit much better than he used to be. But yeah, a guy that you can just, you can find the right moments to sit down on big shots and land counters. He's definitely going to be open for that left hook, which Jose Aldo has a great one, that you can then spend a lot of the rest of the time just sort of keeping him moving and resetting. And just sort of stay ahead. On the other hand, he's just got, he's just capable of doing way more than Pedro Munoz. He's faster. He's, maybe not as hard hitting, but capable, I think, of being more aggressive and staying on top of an opponent more consistently than Pedro can. And he's got the aggressive wrestling game. And there's also the possibility that we get a sort of weird version of Aldo Moraes or Aldo Volkanovski, where Dewalish Willie comes in and has a less intense, more feint-heavy approach, but he doesn't put himself in danger a lot, and Aldo just doesn't get enough done. I mean, we're so used to, Titanic crushing hero bantamweight Aldo, we forget that he's also had a couple performances here that were less than stellar. That there's still lots of echoes of old Jose Aldo in there, for good and for bad. So I don't know. I have a really hard time trying to figure out which of those kinds of fights we're going to see here. I mean, what do you think would be the best approach for Dewalish Willie? Because a lot of this seems to come down to what game plan Dewalish Willie settles on.
I honestly think he should go with, at least in the first round, he should go for the Volkanovski approach. I mean, I don't think he's going to be as successful with it as he was against John Dodson.
No.
For a number of reasons.
Yeah.
Jose Aldo is better than John Dodson. Jose Aldo is like a foot taller than John Dodson.
Yeah.
And Dewalish Willie's ability to work from the outside was obviously at least partially due to the fact that John Dodson is much shorter than him.
He doesn't have that sense of distance or control of distance that Volkanovski has. He doesn't have the defense that even that version of Volkanovski had. If it's a fight like that where Aldo, who tried to jab Volkanovski, if he just gets to land those jabs, it's a different version of that Aldo Volkanovski fight for sure.
Yeah, but Aldo is, I think, still at his most dangerous in round one.
Yeah.
And so it just makes sense, I think, for Dewalish Willie to have a relatively, and he's, Aldo is not the world's biggest. I mean, Dewalish Willie has a very high movement style, and against that kind of approach, Aldo is not the most willing to chase people down.
Right.
It's not what he's really comfortable doing. So yeah, I mean, I think Dewalish Willie definitely should just try and land chipping low kicks and run away for the first round. And, just see where it goes from there. If it's not working, he should just go insane and bum rush him.
Yeah. And wrestle. I mean, I really think this could be, that's so depressing to me to think that this could just be finally the fight where Aldo just gets out wrestled to a loss.
Yeah, I mean, it's going to happen at some point.
Yeah,
I would love to see him win, but it's so much that he is in the house money stage of his career at this point.
Yeah.
what is he even doing fighting elite bantamweights looking for his second title shot in a division where everyone thought he was done. Everyone thought he was done when he went to bantamweight.
Right.
Yeah, insane stuff. So if he gets... And also, I've seen such horrendous Jose Aldo losses.
Right.
Just the latest stoppages, the most horrifying, horrifying images that in some ways I feel just like, how much worse could it get? Please don't take this as a challenge.
Don't say
MMA
that.
Gods.
Don't say that. Don't tempt them, Phil. I'm not inured to it, I've seen it and it's been a horrible every time. And I have the trauma that you see fighters develop where I see it start to happen and I'm like, oh no, not again. And I just lose all hope. So no, I do not want to see the tide start to shift, but yeah. I also don't want to just straight up sadness hedge because I fully agree with your very first assessment, which is that this is a fight Jose Aldo should win. That is he getting surprised by takedowns? Yes. He's still mostly fighting his way back to his feet like a beast. He's an incredible scrambler, getting him to that position where he accepts guard. And I think you're right that typically that has, in fact, almost entirely been fights where he knows he's winning and he's been really, really tired and he just sort of allows it. And that if he has to fight his way back up to win, he will. Did I think he looked much, much slower on the trigger than ever before against Rob Font? Yeah. Did I also think that he found just disgusting, decisive moments whenever he needed them in that fight? Absolutely. And it was one fight removed from the bout with Pedro Munoz, which this one could be quite a bit like, where I thought it was probably one of his best performances ever. Just most controlled, most completely dominant performance. Most proactive too. Like the thing I really loved about that fight is, and what we've seen so much of in bantamweight Aldo is learning to navigate that sort of that flux point where the fight can spin out of control and preceding it, finding a moment where you're like, now is when I have to stop the tide from turning. I'm going to step in and be proactive with a big combination. I'm not going to let the opponent do a Max Holloway to me, where he gets me to the brink and then I have to fight to survive. I'm going to stay ahead. With the same sort of moves that I would do if I was starting to lose. And Dewalish Willie just getting almost murdered instantly by Marlon Moraes. I mean, granted, it is kind of insane. The best moments of Marlon Moraes' last 5 years have come against Jose Aldo and Merab Dewalish Willie. They almost nuked Dewalish Willie and fought, frankly, quite a competent fight against Jose Aldo. Really just kind of showed his boxing class in that one.
Yeah, absolutely.
I'm going to pick Jose just because I don't want to be a sadness hedger. I've yet, even if I've seen Jose Aldo give up disappointing takedowns, I've yet to see someone actually convert them into anything. I dread that this is the fight where that finally happens, that Dewalish Willie is just so relentless, that, if he starts to get Aldo down, he's not going to let up and Aldo's just going to get exhausted by having to wrestle.
Peter Yan kept Aldo down, didn't he? He hurt him to the body and then kept him down
That's
until
true.
the end of the round.
He did, yeah. After hurting him, though, I think, yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, you know what? I think I'm going to pick Aldo too. Why not? Let's go down together.
Yeah.
Fine. Yeah, I mean, Dvalishvili he's been neutralized by old men before. I mean, admittedly, Jose Aldo is no Frankie Sainz. But I mean, I mean that in some more significant ways than Frankie Sainz is someone who was just going to get in a dogfight and try and win.
Yeah.
But yeah, as you said, Dewalish can really get takedowns. He's not a great control wrestler. He's one of those guys that has to rinse and repeat and has to slam over and over again.
Right.
Again, entirely possible this could tire Jose Aldo out if he has takedown success against him.
Absolutely.
And just lead to...
Can you just keep taking Aldo down, even this version, if you have to keep doing it, if he keeps getting back up and then you have to shoot again? He's gonna adjust. He's not a defensive void. You know, he's a thinking fighter.
Yeah. As I said, I'm not sure that the knockoff Volkanovski approach will work as well against someone who is both better than John Dodson, less shot than John Dodson, and much bigger than John Dodson.
Yep.
I think we pretty much saw Dewalish really trying to work that game plan against Moraes, and it worked horribly for him.
Backfired terribly, yeah.
So yeah, I mean, I think I'll take Aldo. I mean, he's been looking more wrestlable. He's been looking more fragile.
Mm-hmm.
Eventually, at some point, it has to all come crashing down.
Yep.
But
We're
wouldn't
close.
be surprised if it happened here. But I just think, as I said, it's a fight that he should win.
Yeah. Yeah, whether it happens here or not, we are close to that moment for sure. You just can't keep going, being amazing forever. And he's already been amazing way longer than pretty much anyone else. I mean, Jose Aldo has essentially made himself the GOAT with this second or third, fourth leg of his career.
No doubt.
But yeah, he's gonna hurt Narabh. I'm willing this into being. He's gonna hurt Narabh. He's gonna hit him with a left hook counter. Narabh's gonna start thinking he's gotten way more technical, and then he's gonna have to wrestle, and it isn't gonna turn around so easily. Like, of course it had to against Marlon Moraes.
Mm-hmm.
It's not gonna be that quick a turnaround. There's still gonna be a fight to be had, and Aldo will have already proven that he can deck him. So, let's go, Jose. Not yet, baby. Let's fuck that gravedigger one more time. You know?
Right in the ass.
Right in the ass. My favorite expression that probably sounds way cooler in Portuguese. And it both sounds incredibly stupid, but still badass in English. I do really like that expression. All right. Let's take one more break then. When we come back, we gotta talk about Dominic Cruz versus Marlon Yoel Chito Romero Vera after this.
Financial support is fantastic, but there are other, even easier ways to support Heavy Hands. Perhaps the best is by spreading the word. We know our fan base. You're all cool, popular people with serious social media presences. You're tastemakers and trendsetters. Okay, there are one or two of you that don't fit that description. You know who you are, but no matter what, you can always help us out by telling folks about the show. And you can also give us a positive rating and review on iTunes and Stitcher, things like that. We rely on word of mouth and positive feedback to grow and improve, so thank you very much for your time and your help. Now, back to the show.
All right, welcome back to Heavy Hands. We are now finally done with literally all of the good fights for UFC 275/8, and moving on to our recap segment. That means the main event of last week's, I gotta use the word, Phil, scintillating card. What a time, you know? What a time to just be sitting at home alone on your couch and just be sort of like tensing up and yelling to no one. And I mean, what an exciting card this was. And you thought it might let you down at some point. You know, it just seemed to get better and better. With, again, some exceptions in my opinion. We're going to talk about that on the bonus episode in the co-main event. But what an incredible capper to an incredible card. This was a fantastic fight. I thought we might have overhyped it for ourselves, honestly. I don't think we did. I really enjoyed this main event. But anyway, I feel like the thing you're going to start with is you think Chito sucks now. That's what you said?
He sucks so bad now.
Why is that?
He's just he's just the worst. Like, what's even the point of Chito Vera now?
He's Yoel.
He's
Marlon Yoel Chito Romero Vera.
Yoel Romero can jump high in the air and like bounced off the cage when he was finishing Lyoto, and does like crazy high octane things. I don't want to see a Yoel Romero that's just jabbing people once per round.
Chito's already high up in the air. He doesn't have to jump. He's tall. Yoel was trying to, reach those heavens that only Luke Rockhold has kissed. Chito knows what that's like, at least by bantamweight standards. There's no need for all this jumping. He's sharp. He's sharp like Yoel. Single, precise moments of success. They're honestly, I think too, like, less technically questionable than Yoel. I think that's how he makes up for not having quite that same level of athleticism that, like, Chito does have some craft. It's just moments of craft that are not connected to each other. That's the Yoel feeling, but they're connected in his head. He's paying attention the whole time. He sees how you react to one thing, and he's going to try the next thing, and it's going to come quicker than you expected, and the timing is going to be weird. He's dangerous.
The timing is going to be weird because it will be separated by several minutes from his last strike.
But even the timing of, you think you see his strike coming, and it's not the strike you thought it was, or it comes half a beat too soon or half a beat too late, and you commit to your defense at the wrong moment, and then you get murdered. That's what it's like fighting Chito Vera these days. You're mad about it, though.
Yeah, I just hate him so much now.
How dare you?
I just want him to lose to everyone.
How dare you? You didn't enjoy this fight? It was awesome.
I enjoyed the parts where Chito was losing. Like, what's he doing? Like, what's the point of being this guy? I don't understand. Like,
what do you mean? It's self-evident. There's the parts.
Why isn't he throwing more strikes? Why is he just throwing rounds away?
Because he's Chito. Have you not been paying attention throughout this man's entire career?
Yeah, I've been watching him get worse and worse. Like, throw less and less until he's turned into this.
You disgust me. You
moderately spatially aggressive, moderately more spatially aggressive Tyron Woodley.
Oh my god.
Like,
that is so wrong, and
I can understand other people who just, like, stay off the gas because they're terrified, like Woodley, because they're terrified that they're going to run out of steam. Like, they're going to get tired. But Chito doesn't throw anything just because he thinks he's cool.
Chito doesn't throw anything because he knows he's going to win. It is cool. Thinks he's cool.
Because
he knows he's cool. That's why.
Because he knows he can just tank every shot that comes at him.
Yeah. Oh.
Like, it's not like he's avoiding these with slick defense. He just gets hit a whole bunch. And then he's like, now it is eventually time for me to throw my one strike of the round. I mean, how many strikes did he throw in this whole fight? He threw like 3 strikes and got like 7 knockdowns.
That's definitely not true. I don't know what the number is. I'm going to find out now. But I think that may be a bit of an overstatement.
It was simply the rippling shockwaves from his last knockdown that came to knock Cruz down again.
He threw 156 to Dominic's 249. And against Rob Font, how many do you think just by your memory, which is clearly so sharp, how many do you think he threw against Rob Font?
It must be, I mean, it's going to be a ton in that one, because he knocked him, because he would throw one strike on the feet, and then he would beat him up on the ground after knocking him down. It's
283. To Font's staggering 516.
Yeah, but on the feet, it was like 4.
That's not true either. No, he's not that inactive. He's also just fighting crazily active fighters now. This is the thing. It just stands out more. You watch his fight with Frankie Edgar. There's no gulf in activity in that fight. There's no gulf in activity in his fight with Davey Grant or his fight with Song Yadong.
Oh, as I said, he's getting worse.
No, it's just that these are
deteriorating more and more.
These are fights where people aren't.
This is going to draw, like, there's only one ultimate outcome for this, is that he's going to end up getting a title shot, and it's going to have to be against TJ Dillashaw, because Dillashaw is old.
Yeah.
And then
he's going to spend 23 minutes praying like a monk.
He's going to throw 3 jabs.
Yeah.
Which will win him round 1 and 3 due to bouncing Dillashaw off the back of the cage every time he throws them.
Yeah, which is awesome.
Then his third jab that he throws in round 5 will simply cause TJ Dillashaw's head to explode.
And you'll complain about that.
I will!
It'll be the most disgustingly cool thing you've ever seen. You're going to be like, Wah! He just tanked every shot that came at him. He didn't
I'm
even.
100% gonna say that.
He didn't even blink. He was totally unconcerned. It's as if he knew he was going to win, and then he did. Boo fucking who, Phil? You know?
It's dumb.
It's awesome.
This is a dumb way of fighting.
It's awesome. Look, I think some of this is simply the impression his opponents are giving. That these last two guys are fighting incredibly active. They are trying to overwhelm Chito. They're like, here's a guy who puts up his guard and he's going to let me hit him. This is another point too. He doesn't get hit that much, that cleanly. Does he get hit a lot? Absolutely. Does he?
Because he's not trying to throw strikes.
Yeah, he will, but he's gathering information. It's a good way of using defense. He's gathering information that entire time and putting it to use.
It's not a good way of using defense. It only works because he's Chito Vera.
It works fine. He's
the most inhumanly durable fighter we've ever seen in MMA.
He is horrifically durable, yes. And he leverages it, and it's part of what makes that defense work. It is also a sort of approach that is just more viable in sports that aren't MMA. Like, there's plenty of boxers who go out there and just burn 4 rounds, just letting their opponent bounce shit off their gloves to figure out where the cracks are and how to exploit them.
Like Homer Simpson in his famous pro career.
Well, I guess that makes Dominic Cruz, whom last week we were talking about as truly one of the greatest fighters of all time, who's continuing to cement his legacy. I guess that makes him Boxcar Bob, doesn't it, Phil? Because why would it work? Why would Homer Simpson...
Or it just makes him very old.
Look, I get it. It's weird. It's idiosyncratic. But it's not totally dysfunctional either. It's not that we're using the ability to absorb damage, but it's the confidence too. That's the other thing. Like he's not as many shots are hitting him as it appears because he's sitting there with his gloves up and he's got his eyes on his opponent the entire time. So when the shots do land, they're not surprising him. This is a way of enhancing durability that is not just physical cheating. The man believes in his durability. That's the Chito Vera thing. And was the Yoel Romero thing too. As much as the athleticism was the insane self-belief of a 6,500-year-old Babylonian god that inhabits Yoel Romero's body to this day. All praise to Sin, the god of the moon. But there is a calculating nature to what Chito is doing. That you can see the results. Like, this is a better version of the guy Chito has always been. It's not worse. You see, you're looking at Chito and you're like, oh, the way for Chito to win is to not be a guy who loses the first round anymore. But that kind of change just isn't possible for most people, Phil. That's the guy he is. Now
or the second round.
Now he's
He should just rely on landing one strike and knocking his opponent down to win every round.
It works great.
This is incredibly sustainable.
Now he has found a way to swagger through the parts of the fight that he's losing and put them to use later in the fight. It's not just, oh, I'm in here having an existential crisis while my opponent beats me up. I have to do something. It's, I know I'm going to do something, and I'm going to do it based on all the shit that's happening right now, all this bullshit that isn't affecting me that I don't have to worry about. It's awesome.
Why can't he just do it earlier?
Because he's Chito Vera. What do you mean? You act like you
just throw strikes in round 1.
You act like you haven't watched this guy's whole career. He's a slow starter. Who can say what?
Yeah, but he was a slow starter in that he would get hit early, but at least he would try things.
Not always. He's had plenty of fights throughout his career where in fact, I would say there are more slow starts in Chito's career where he has done next to nothing in the first round than there are ones where he's tried things and gotten punished and that's why he loses. He's always been an inactive fighter early in the fight. Now he's a 5-round fighter who's inactive early. He can stretch that period to 1.5 rounds and it's no longer a period where he's got Colin Oyama in his corner screaming himself red in the face, trying to make Chito do something, anything. it is no longer a, like the style is a double-sided coin. It's your insecurities acting themselves out, but it's also, because of that, it's a coping mechanism is what a fighting style is. It's how you cope with these things. And he's fully coped now. This is no longer a thing that happens whether he wanted to or not. He's made his peace with how his fights go. He's comfortable with it. And so he goes in there early with all the confidence that this is not how the fight's going to be going the whole time. And you can see it. Like, it's not just Dominic Cruz being an old man. Certainly part of it. The fact that Chito is just hitting these people with one strike and then it just like start to implode. Sometimes is to do with age or physicality or whatever. It's always a factor, but it is also that he is finding the absolute perfect moments to wreck them. That these shots that he's landing that are hurting people are largely they're well-timed counters, or they are set up by jabs, or they are exploiting defensive patterns in the opponent's movement that he has spent the early portions of the fight studying and figuring out what to do with them. And that was definitely the case here.
Uh-huh.
I mean, how is it that in all these fights he just keeps hurting his opponents with more and more ease as the fight goes on? It's not because I think it's a mistake to think
Rob Font and Dominic Cruz's chins have disintegrated.
It's a mistake to think, oh, he could have done that earlier.
Well, we said that last time. It's because he is all he has to think about.
Right, but it's a mistake to think he could have done that earlier. He can't do it earlier. It doesn't have the information yet, and he's not Yoel Romero.
He could do something to build the information.
That's true, but that wouldn't be Chito Vera.
Learning to use his jab proactively.
Yeah.
Instead of just standing there swatting at air for like 8 minutes. Is beyond him.
Yes. I think that's clear now.
It is.
How many fights have we seen Chito Vera in? The man's been in the UFC for like 20 fights now.
Mm-hmm.
He's lost every first round probably. There's very few first rounds he's won.
There was one where we were like really worried about him winning the first round, then he won it. Which one was that one? I'm forgetting now. He just looked totally consistent and...
Oh. As in you thought he was going to win the first round, then he didn't?
Oh, we thought he was going to lose it.
Oh.
It was probably Andre Ewell or something like that. We were like, he's going to really start off getting picked off in this fight, and then he just crushed him.
Oh, yeah. Yeah, I think that was it. So, I don't know, man. I feel like you've forgotten what got Chito here. It's baked in.
No, I've watched the progression. I was annoyed after the Rob Font fight, but now it's just like he should just go and lose to Pedro. He should just go and lose to Sean O'Malley now. Like it's enough.
He'll beat Sean O'Malley.
I mean, he will. They are like this recent run has really brought forward how much he is Sean O'Malley's absolute natural nemesis and how funny that is.
He is a natural predator. That what happened to Sean O'Malley in their first fight was a mercy of the gods.
Yeah, I said this on Twitter, but 100% Sean O'Malley is just breaking all his limbs on Chito if he fights him.
Absolutely.
Chito doesn't even have to punch him.
It'd be the most Chito Vera performance of all time.
He could finally be Willie Pep.
Yeah. He could, for all we know.
As he so believes he is, just win without throwing a strike because the other guy is just shattering himself on you.
That's a much funnier version of that Willie Pep apocryphal story.
It was like, people be like, yeah, you'll tell your grandchildren about it. You're like, I saw Chito Vera, the man who won a fight without throwing a strike. You're like, wow, was he just a defensive wizard? And you're like, no.
No, he was a block of concrete. He was an inanimate block of concrete, and the other guy couldn't stop hitting him. Yeah. But come on. This was a good fight. Dominic Cruz looked sensational.
I actually thought Dominic Cruz did look very good.
He looked great. And clearly like is such a clever fighter that like, and we're going to get into like this is the other thing why I don't understand why you're upset is that this is a classic example of me being like, both of us being like, oh, this guy does the right things in the wrong way. You know, shoddy technique, all these technical lapses, but all the ideas are really sound. And this is an example that proves that sort of assessment, because it's like, oh, the technical lapses are what got him murdered.
But also, it depends to what extent you're looking at the macro or the micro of it. Because if you look at, you know, this is one of the things, you know, when Cruz himself is banging on commentary, he's always saying, you know, you should go first, you should throw in combination, and so on. And as I said before, like, I agree with him on most of these things. Like, he has a very good macro idea of what there is of you know, how to win MMA fights. But and this to me is kind of more important than even the, you know, the technical elements of how they throw. Obviously, Chito has much better punching mechanics and form and so on.
Yeah.
On his strikes, and he did figure out which way Dominic Cruz was going and killed him for it.
And he countered his kicks, which we talked about, and which Cruz really brought out a lot of very kick heavy performance.
Yeah, but you know, Cruz worked the body. Like with punches and kicks.
Never seen him throw that many body
really
punches.
Had a good process for driving Chito back once he got pushed into the cage. Yeah, I mean, it was just like, it was lots of macro good ideas, and you know, I tend to value that more than the like technical minutiae of, you know, if someone is throwing nice strikes, like again, once every 2 rounds, bear in mind the amount of strikes that Chito throws will decrease the more I talk about him.
Yeah. He threw about half a strike per round.
Yeah, it's so I respect Cruz's application more than Vera's, essentially.
Yeah, maybe that's the difference between our perspectives on this, is that I like tactical shit. I like big picture strategy stuff. I like, you know, fighting the mindsets and all that, but I like when just good technique wins, and this is an example of Chito having a very unique mindset to bring a technical edge to bear. On a guy who has tons and tons and tons of good ideas, none of which are really ironclad in their execution. Yeah, but Dominic Cruz...
that is one of the things which supports Chito's style, is that, as opposed to Cruz's, is that in order to keep himself being unpredictable, it is insanely mentally exhausting. It must be for Cruz. It's one of the most impressive things about his style, to be honest, is that you just find yourself watching the sheer amount of options he cycles through.
Right.
It's like, how do you do this under stress? But, you know, the issue with that is that obviously it doesn't take, you know, as you said, the intercept points of those, like crazy things he does when he'll, you know, change stances and look like he's stepping forward, but actually he's using it as an escape option where he's just going to turn and run.
Yeah.
So that kind of stuff, if it is interpreted, is and can be instant death.
Yeah, and I liked that aspect of this fight, that Chito almost, the longer it went on, made Dominic Cruz look like a Jackson Wink fighter. You said way back in the day that you may have had some term for this dynamic, but the sort of the switch up that doesn't work because you can answer both options the same way. And this is Dominic Cruz. Like his footwork those are his setups. His most of his feints are contained in his footwork. His stance switches, his angle changes, most of these things come off of that weird, unique, bouncy footwork that he has. He'll give you these little bumps with his feet and these half steps in, and then he comes in the other stance. Or as you said, the one he got killed for is he, draws something out of you and then he shuffles off and sort of turns away and slips out of range. And the early going of this fight was just a process of Chito figuring out the footwork. The thing Dominic Cruz is most famous for and sussing out all the setups so that he could essentially answer more and more of Cruz's attacks however he wanted, because what really mattered is that he could time him properly coming in. He sussed out that first layer, that essential first layer in Cruz's game. And he also was plenty proactive as the fight wore on. Plenty of jabs that set things up, more so than they did in the Rob Font fight. Some really nice 1-2s out of Chito. The 1-1-2 was one of the knockdowns. A straight up 1-2 was another knockdown. These were Chito keying in on what reactions his jab was getting out of Cruz. It's just that a lot of the data gathering was just entirely passive. Just let Cruz show him. But I don't think it would be that passive if it wasn't Dominic Cruz or Rob Font in these last two fights. It hasn't been before. I don't think we've suddenly reached a point where Chito is now just incapable of being a little more proactive if he needs to, but he doesn't have to against these guys. They're just giving him information nonstop. And he likes that, I think.
I don't think he should like that. I don't think he should like that when it's just
not
losing
work.
him rounds.
It's not going to work against everyone, of course. But it's a style. No style does. And Chito, I never started rooting for Chito because he was a perfect fighter. Come on. He's weird. His style wouldn't work for other people, but it does work for him. And I don't think it's a complete accident that it works for him. I think he has matured into being the guy he's always been, but just a more effective, more concise guy where getting those few opportunities matters more and more. Some of that's the fact that he's fighting old guys and fragile guys, but Chito Vera just stuffing every single one of Cruz actually going for more aggressively for his wrestling than he has in ages. It's seeming early like it was gonna work. And then there comes a point 2.5 rounds in where Chito is just stuffing every shot with ease, not even having to think about it. This is a guy who is making reads while he's being defensive. And also in round 3, Cruz pressing forward with combinations, Chito intercepting punches with parries, ducking under, layers of defense, and coming back with counters. He is expanding what he does as these fights go on. He isn't just doing the same thing and adding in one strike per round. I mean, I know you're not literally arguing that's what he's doing either, but there is a process there, and there is, an expansion of tactics from this process, as weird and unique to Chito as it may be.
I don't argue that he's not improving and thinking as the fight goes on. I just find it baffling and silly that he fights so passively at the beginning that he doesn't draw any information out of his opponent, that he's just relying on them to give it to him.
He doesn't have to against these two guys.
He just throws rounds away.
What drawing can you do against 2022 Dominic Cruz or 2021 Rob Font? Henry Cejudo cut Dominic Cruz down with low kicks against the cage. Yeah.
And fucked him up.
Yeah.
And admittedly,
there's two guys
moderately less athletically gifted than Henry Cejudo.
There's two guys who are exactly the same.
4 feet taller than. He's also 4 feet taller than Henry Cejudo.
Wow, you're currently describing ways in which Chito Vera and Henry Cejudo are vastly different from each other. Interesting, very interesting. It's almost as if they can't fight the same way.
No, it's just that if your game plan is going to be cut down Dominic Cruz's movement and beat him up, then, other people have done it more effectively than Chito Vera did, and more proactively. He doesn't need to just throw rounds away on the understanding that he's going to land one punch and obliterate his opponent. I don't think it's sustainable.
No. But I also don't think it is necessarily the end-all be-all of what Chito is capable of. I just think, again, these are two guys who there is absolutely no need to draw to draw information out of them. They give it to you, and that's what Chito ultimately wants.
They're also building up generally pretty sizable round leads.
Yeah.
We'll get to see, because he's going to be fighting someone who is different from them now.
Yeah.
Whatever happens, he's going to be either fighting the winner of O'Malley Yarn, or he's going to be fighting the winner of Song Yadong, Corey Sandhagen. I mean, maybe if he can pull this shit off against Corey Sandhagen,
come on,
I will be impressed and horrified.
You'll be mad.
I will be super mad, yes.
You're going to be really mad.
If he beats Corey Sandhagen off a jab and a knee, as his 2 strikes, then, what hope is there for MMA?
I am shocked and disgusted by all of this. That you've apparently kept this bottled up for so long. I feel as if you've really just sort of protected your place on this show by just not coming at Chito Vera this hard. But I do think it is a very promising development for Chito Vera episodes in the future, because apparently he's like Giga Chikadze level for you.
Yeah, he's reached that level now. I watched the Font fight and I was just like, sucks. And I watched this one and I was like, what's he doing? Yeah, he's Giga Chikadze now.
Wow. Unbelievable. I can't believe that you're saying all this. It was so awesome. He's so cool. And I just don't get it. These are incredibly fun fights. I think they're reproducible for Chito. They're just not reproducible for anyone else or for most other people. But, yeah, I mean,
that's what we've traditionally valorized on Heavy Hands. It's
processes that work for everyone.
Yeah.
Yeah, but don't you, we've also, come on, we also like we did the League of Extraordinary Journeymen. We like the weirdos with idiosyncratic games that just work for them.
They work them because they're working around their flaws, not because
this is exactly what Chito's doing.
Not because they're built out of unobtainium.
He is working around his flaws and working with his strengths. He's not a first round crushing fighter. He never has been. You have to be an equally or a significantly more trash first round fighter almost invariably for Chito to be able to do that to you in the first round. It's not in him. That is his flaw. And this is what you get. And it rules.
Sucks.
It rules so hard. Okay, so what do you
so bad.
What do you think we see with Chito next? What would you like to see most? Let's put it that way, because we don't know how the matchmakers think or what's going to happen.
I'm just losing a funny fight. Let's be honest.
Sandhagen would.
That's all we want from him.
Sandhagen would be awesome.
Sandhagen is. I mean, so I think if I had to pick who I think is going to win those fights, I think actually Song Yadong might beat Sandhagen. He's looking incredible at the moment.
Yeah.
And also Yarn is obviously going to beat O'Malley, barring something super weird happening. So he's either going to rematch Song Yadong, or he's going to fight Peter Yarn next. And I don't think he will win either of those fights, but they would be absolutely fantastic fights.
Yeah, I definitely wouldn't pick him to, I definitely, that's the ambulance coming for your reputation, Phil. After this embarrassing segment. I definitely would not pick him to beat Peter Yan. Song Yadong, I mean, that last fight was tooth and nail. It was almost totally 50-50. It really, either guy could have got the decision and I would have been happy. So, I don't know about that one. What do you do if you can do some of the Julio Arce stuff, but you are made of unobtainium?
Yeah.
And Song Yadong just cannot finish you. You get an interesting fight out of Song Yadong, no doubt.
Yeah, I mean, I think that he just had a real stumbling block in his fight with, what's his face? O'Malley's training partner. I think Yadong's just looked really, really good since then. I think he's just, he's still insanely young. Mm-hmm. And I think he's just coming into his absolute prime at the moment. Mm-hmm. I would expect him to I think he looks more improved than Chito did since their last fight, essentially. I think he can now fight an outside style in a way which he couldn't then, but he can still probably brawl and, frankly, probably still outpunch Chito.
Yeah.
Which is what he did basically the last time they fought.
Yep. Yeah. I did pick him to. I did think he won it, even if it was close to a coin flip. I was like, yeah, if I have to get it to someone, it's the guy who landed the harder shots in these 50-50 exchanges.
Yeah. Yeah, even if it wasn't like hurting Chito, you could see like, the ground shake, and you could see the little clouds of dust coming out of the ceiling.
Yeah, yeah. Would that sell you more on Chito fights if they like covered him in like cornstarch like they do in kung fu movies? So when he gets hit, it's just a big poof. Good for the camera.
Yeah. And we need to sell these more, Chito. You can't just keep walking through everything.
Make it look like it's hitting you so losers like Phil are actually impressed. Wow, Phil. He's unkillable and he keeps destroying his opponents with ease. I hate it.
Yep.
All right, fine. Well, I very much look forward to our next Chito Vera fight episode, because I just to find out, like, you may as well have just revealed to me that you're like a devotee of Adolf Hitler. That all this time we've been best friends, just the fastest of companions. We tell each other our innermost secrets, and then I find out that you're aligned yourself with one of history's greatest monsters.
I used to love Chito, but now I've simply turned against him. It's like I've just, in this analogy, I've just found out, how great Adolf Hitler was at, getting all those roads built and the Autobahn. And I've just really come around on him.
I think you're going with my insane analogy. It was really.
Really, there's a lot to like about him when you think about it. Well, apparently, also, this is just as an aside, this is one of the myths of the Second World War, is that this is like with many political things, all the kind of getting Nazi Germany back to work stuff was was largely like implementations from Hitler's predecessors that he was kind of reluctantly forced into doing.
That in fact they were really only good at the nationalism part.
Yeah.
And all the socialism stuff was actually kind of an accident. Well, top 10 anime betrayals. It's going to get heated, I'm sure, next time Chito fights, but that's going to do it for this week's episode. Chito Vera.
Did you see my sole tweet I posted for like the several hours after I watched the fight? Just said Chito Vera.
Chito Vera. Yeah.
Yep.
Well, I am here for the Marlon Yoel Chito Romero Vera era. Oh my God. What a fun sentence to say. And that'll do it for this week's edition of Heavy Hands. I will remind you once again to check out our Patreon, where you will be hearing a bonus episode in which we discuss several of the many thrilling fights from this sensational Fight Night undercard, which looked quite underwhelming on paper and in reality was just straight up one of the best cards of the year. Non-stop action. We're going to talk about that on the Patreon, patreon.com/heavyhands. It's $3 to hear that and all of our other stuff. Until then, find Phil on Twitter @EvilGregJackson. Look at that amazing tweet that he did about Chito Vera, his incredible insights and whatever. I'm at Boxing Bush, BUSCH. We'll talk to you next week when it's what's next on the docket.
After 278.
Gon versus Tuivasa.
Oh, and remember, we are going to be trying to recap.
Oh, yeah.
Anthony Joshua and Alexander Usyk, who are going to be fighting again. We haven't broken it down this episode because we don't have much to say at the moment, other than Alexander Usyk is probably going to win again. But at least from my perspective, I actually thought. Well, I think pretty much all of us, including Kyle, were actually pretty impressed by how well Joshua did last time.
It wasn't completely one-sided. It was a good effort. It doesn't seem that he's on Usyk's level, but he is also much bigger and could maybe make a couple of pretty doable adjustments and make it, close again. So we're going to have Kyle McLaughlin on next week to talk about that after the fact, which is always the way I most enjoy breaking down fights anyway. Thank you for reminding me. Anthony Joshua, Alexander Usyk. Next week, in addition to apparently Gon Tuivasa, hopefully something happens with Usman Edwards. Whatever it is, there will be lots of stuff coming to you next week. And until then, if you came here today for the finer points of face punching, you came to the right place. This has been Heavy Hands.